The first sound that broke through the radio was not a voice, but breath, ragged, uneven, dragged inward as if the act of breathing itself had become a labor that required conscious effort. The speaker crackled under the strain, static tearing across the signal in sharp bursts that made the exposed bulbs in the corridor tremble and dim. Gallion stopped where he stood. The corridor outside his bunk was narrow and low-ceilinged, a passage carved from reinforced concrete and layered with decades of improvised repair. Pipes thick with mineral scale ran overhead like iron arteries, pulsing with heat and pressure drawn from Noah's aging systems. Condensation clung to the walls, and names, scratched, carved, etched by hand, layered over one another where people had needed proof that they had existed, even briefly. At the far end of the hall, a maintenance lamp flickered with mechanical indifference, casting the corridor in alternating frames of light and shadow. Beside him, Gimble hovered in place, its brass-shelled chassis humming softly as internal gyros corrected for the vibration in the air. The drone's single optical lens widened, narrowing again as it adjusted to the interference.
Did you hear that?
Gimble asked, its voice low, cautious. Gallion was already moving. He crossed the corridor in long, measured strides, one hand trailing along the wall as his fingers passed over cold rivets and damp seams. His bionic leg compensated automatically for uneven flooring, each step silent, precise. He reached the comm station, a bolted-together assembly of scavenged circuitry and reinforced housing, just as the radio hissed again. Above the speaker, someone had scrawled a warning in thick black grease. "Don't listen alone." Gallion leaned closer, bracing one hand against the metal casing, and turned the dial by a fraction. Static surged. Then a voice emerged, fractured but unmistakable.
"Gallion."
The sound of his name, broken and distorted, tightened something deep in his chest. He adjusted the dial again, slower this time, and the signal steadied just enough for the voice to return.
"Gallion, you there?"
Connor, not a memory, not the invincible presence, Gallion carried with him through sleepless nights. This was thinner, strained by pain and distance, stretched across a dead world by failing relays and stolen frequencies.
"Connor."
Gallion said, the word roughened by disbelief and relief in equal measure. Gimble drifted closer, its glow dimming instinctively.
Oh.
It murmured.
Oh, Gallion.
Connor's breathing rasped through the speaker before he spoke again.
"They got me, bro."
Gallion's grip tightened on the casing, metal biting into his palm.
"Where are you?"
he demanded, though he knew the question had no answer. This transmission was a bleed-through, a one-way echo, but his body refused to accept that reality. Connor laughed weakly, the sound wet at the edges.
"I know you won't listen to this, but don't come after me, man.
Static swelled, threatening to drown him out.
Live your life."
Gallion turned the dial too sharply, panic creeping into the motion, and Connor's voice warped before settling again. When Connor spoke next, the fear was gone, replaced by something gentler.
"I'll see you in hell, little brother."
The old joke struck deeper than any wound. Connor had always called him that, deliberately wrong, deliberately kind, back when they had been starving children, stealing warmth from boiler rooms in Noah's lower levels. The radio crackled violently. New sounds bled through the static. Harsh, rasping voices layered over one another, their cadence alien and unmistakable scale language. Gallion's augmented ears isolated it instantly. Not the words, but the tone, orders, urgency. Predatory intent. Connor's breathing returned faster now.
"Oh shit."
Metal clanged. A hissed voice, close. Connor grunted, a sharp exhale as if struck.
"You want me, you bastards? Come take it."
The sentence ended abruptly. Gallion's vision narrowed as the rest of the world fell away. Static surged, then collapsed into silence. Gallion remained bent over the comm station long after the signal died, his palms still pressed to the casing as though touch alone might pull Connor back across the void. Behind him, Noah continued to breathe. Finally, he straightened.
"Gimble, we need to find a route to my brother, now."
Gimble began the calculations.
Section 2.
Noah endured by force of habit. The underground city exhaled steam and smoke through a maze of vents and pressure valves, its infrastructure stitched together from pre-war remnants and desperate ingenuity. The air carried the metallic tang of rust and oil, underscored by the ever-present hiss of boiling water rushing through pipes that had long since outlived their intended lifespan. Gallion moved through the corridors with practiced ease, his presence registering before he spoke. People stepped aside, not hurriedly, not fearfully, but with a quiet acknowledgement reserved for those who had survived long enough to become part of the city's unspoken hierarchy. Noah had been carved beneath the bones of a rural California town, erased from surface maps after the scales took control. What began as shelters and service tunnels had grown downward, becoming districts layered atop one another in a slow descent away from the sky. Here humanity did not hide. It adapted. Markets lined the wider corridors, their stalls bolted directly into the brick and steel walls. Traders whispered offers over the hiss of steam, displaying salvaged weapons, data shards, and biotech implants laid out on stained oilcloth. Scale-derived synthetic drugs glimmered faintly in sealed vials, their promise written clearly in the eyes of those who lingered too long nearby. Gallion passed a man slumped against a pillar, pupils blown wide, green residue drying at the corners of his mouth. Borrowed strength, borrowed clarity, borrowed time. Gimble hovered at Gallion's side, its soft amber glow cutting through the haze.
Connor's signal propagated through 3 relays before collapsing.
It said.
People are already talking.
Let them.
Gallion replied. They turned down a narrower corridor marked with faded insignia, symbols of Noah's underground council, stenciled decades earlier when governance still pretended to mean stability. A reinforced steel door recognized Gallion's retinal signature and disengaged with a heavy clunk. Inside, the air was cleaner, cooler. Maps covered every surface, digital projections layered over hand-drawn schematics. Red lights marked scale-controlled zones across the western United States, while blue lines traced hidden routes and listening posts beneath them. Vanessa stood at the center of the room. She leaned over the command table, her posture rigid with exhaustion and focus, dark hair pulled tight enough to expose the scar that cut from temple to scalp. Her coat bore the marks of long service, patched, reinforced, threaded with flexible armor salvaged from obsolete military stock.
I told them not to wake you.
She said without turning.
They didn't.
Gallion replied.
I was already awake.
Vanessa straightened and faced him, her gaze flicking briefly to his bionic leg before settling on his eyes.
So?
She said.
I'm
You
going
heard it.
dark.
Gallion said. The words settled heavily between them. Vanessa folded her arms.
No.
I'm not asking.
She studied him in silence, then spoke carefully.
You know what San Francisco is? You know what Togol's hub does to people who walk in alone?
They took my brother.
I know.
She said.
Connor volunteered.
He volunteered because command needed someone expendable.
Vanessa's jaw tightened.
That's not fair.
You're right, it isn't.
She turned away, pacing the length of the table, the light catching old burn scars along her arms, scale plasma, poorly healed.
We lose people every week.
She said.
If everyone who lost someone went charging into a hub...
Yeah, well, I'm not everyone.
Vanessa stopped.
No.
She said quietly.
You're not. And that's what scares me.
Gallion's gaze drifted to the projection of the coast, San Francisco pulsing like a living wound.
I'm gonna find him, or I'll end it.
Vanessa did not look at him when she answered.
Gallion, don't forget San Diego.
The words carried weight that neither of them explained. After a long moment, she slid a data shard across the table.
Routes.
She said.
Old ones.
Gallion pocketed it.
I won't stop you.
Vanessa said.
After this, you don't exist.
Outside, Noah swallowed him once more, breathing steadily as Gallion walked toward the dead world above.
Section 3.
Gallion remembered Noah before it learned how to survive. Gimble hovered near the transit rail lights, scanning structural stress fractures out of habit.
Nostalgia spike detected.
It said mildly.
Statistically unhelpful, but emotionally consistent.
Before the deeper levels were reinforced and the steam systems balanced into something resembling stability, the city had been a maze of damp corridors and borrowed shelter, where the lights failed without warning and the walls wept constantly from the pressure of the earth above. It was there in the lower tiers where heat pooled and air grew thin, that Gallion and Connor learned the first rule of living underground. You did not wait for help. They had been children then, too young to understand the shape of the war that had taken their parents, old enough to understand that no one was coming back for them. The Scales had not yet claimed full control of California, but the fighting had already made the surface a rumor rather than a place. Their parents had gone topside on a mission and returned only as names etched into a ledger no one read aloud. Connor had been the one to take Gallion's hand. "Stay close," he'd said with a confidence he did not yet possess but practiced relentlessly. He would always follow it with a comforting, "I'll figure it out." And he always did. The memory rose unbidden as Gallion descended through Noah's lower transit rails, his body moving on instinct while his mind drifted backward through time. Each footstep echoed faintly, accompanied by the muted whine of servos in his bionic leg, a reminder that survival had exacted its own price. Gallion and Connor had grown hard quickly. Where Connor learned momentum, Gallion learned precision. He learned how to turn anger into angles, and Connor turned anger into forward motion. By the time Gallion received his synthetic ears at 13, lying rigid on a surgical slab while a black market medic rewired his auditory nerves, Gallion had already learned how to listen without hearing. Gimble's voice chimed softly in Gallion's memory, reconstructed from old logs.
Calibration complete. Please refrain from screaming.
It was a memory of the first thing he'd ever heard. He learned how to watch people. He read tension in shoulders, hesitation in hands, the subtle shift that came just before violence. When Gallion woke from surgery, sound had flooded him all at once, too sharp, too loud, too much. Connor had been there, crouched beside the bed, voice low and steady as he talked Gallion through the chaos.
Hey, just pick one thing. My voice. Stick to that.
Gallion had clung to it. They grew into the war together. By the time the Scales completed their takeover of the region, Noah had already begun transforming into something more organized, more desperate. Underground councils formed. Ex-military advisors filtered in through shattered NATO channels. Resistance cells were born, collapsed, and reborn under different names. Gallion and Connor became useful. They ran messages through contested tunnels, escorted engineers to failing pressure stations, and learned how to fight in spaces where every sound carried and every mistake echoed. When the underground government formalized its tactical forces, spinal replacements became mandatory. Synthetic vertebrae fused with neural interfaces that allowed faster response, greater strength, and endurance beyond human limits. Connor had volunteered first.
"Don't look at me like that,"
He'd said, flashing that crooked grin as they stood outside the clinic doors.
Someone's got to see if it kills you.
It didn't. Not immediately. The implants changed them both, but differently. Gallion became quieter, more contained, his movements economical and exact. Connor became larger in presence, his confidence amplified, his recklessness sharpened into something people followed. Together they became a problem. Noah knew their names. When things went wrong, when a supply line vanished or a scale patrol pushed too far underground, Gallion and Connor were often the ones sent to correct it. They argued constantly, usually about risk, usually in low voices just before everything went loud. Connor always went first. Gallion always covered him. That balance had never failed them until San Diego. The memory surfaced like a bruise pressed too hard. Gallion did not let it finish forming. He passed through a junction where the rails split, the left path marked by flickering hazard lights and warning glyphs scratched into the wall. A group of young recruits lingered nearby, pretending not to watch him. Their augmentations were new, too clean, too bright. They reminded him painfully of who he and Connor had once been. He kept moving. Gimble adjusted its altitude.
If this is the part where you suppress traumatic memory and double down on poor decision-making, I am required to note my objection.
Connor's last mission had been different from the others. Covert, isolated, officially voluntary. Gallion had argued against it in a quiet room with too many cameras and not enough air. Vanessa had been there, arms crossed, eyes tired.
"We need eyes inside the hub.
Command had said.
We need confirmation."
And if he doesn't come back?
Gallion had asked. Connor had only smiled.
"Relax.
He'd said later, clapping Gallion on the shoulder.
I'll be fine. You worry too much, little brother."
Gallion reached the final access lift and stopped. For a moment he rested his forehead against the cold metal wall, the hum of machinery vibrating through bone and implant alike. Connor had always believed momentum could carry you through anything. Gallion knew better. Momentum only worked until it didn't. The lift doors slid open with a hydraulic sigh. Gallion stepped inside. Above him, the dead world waited.
Section 4.
Gimble's glow flickered as the lift ascended.
Surface radiation levels remain within survivable thresholds.
It said,
Which is my optimistic way of saying, try not to linger.
The lift shuddered as it climbed, its cables groaning in protest as though the earth itself resisted letting anyone return to the surface. Gallion stood alone inside the cage, boots planted wide for balance, one hand resting against the steel mesh as the city of Noah descended out of reach beneath him. The hum of machinery vibrated through his bones and implants alike, a familiar reassurance that faded with every meter gained. Above him, the shaft narrowed, its walls stained with mineral runoff and old scorch marks left behind by earlier attempts to reclaim what had been lost. Gimble hovered near the ceiling, its glow dimmed to a tight halo.
Surface conditions are unstable.
It said, voice filtered through caution rather than fear.
Radiation pockets, electromagnetic interference, and
I know.
Gallion replied. The lift lurched once more, then slowed. A warning klaxon chirped weakly before dying altogether, replaced by the grinding sound of manual brakes engaging. When the doors finally parted, cold air rushed in like a living thing. Gallion stepped out onto the surface. The sky above rural California had lost its color years ago. What remained was a pale, bruised expanse veiled by drifting particulate clouds that blotted out the sun and scattered what little light remained into a dull, omnipresent glare. The land stretched outward in broken lines, collapsed farmhouses, skeletal wind turbines frozen mid-rotation, and highways split and sunken where the earth had given up pretending to hold together. This was not a battlefield. It was an aftermath. Gallion paused, letting his augmented ears recalibrate as they filtered wind noise from distant movement. Somewhere far off, metal scraped against stone. Not recent, not close. He moved forward. Gimble drifted ahead, mapping wind shear and particulate density.
I am recording this,
It said.
in case we need to argue later about whose idea this was.
His boots crunched over layers of ash and dried soil as he passed the remains of a town whose name had long since faded from memory. A rusted water tower leaned at an impossible angle, its base fractured and exposed. Solar panels lay shattered across rooftops, their glass faces dulled by years of abrasive storms. Gallion thought of how the biotech kept him alive out here.
Barely.
Gimble added.
You continue to test the definition.
His bionic leg absorbed impact and adjusted for uneven ground, while the spinal replacement threaded through his nervous system dampened fatigue signals before they could take root. His synthetic ears painted the environment in invisible contours, allowing him to sense distance and shape even when visibility failed. Even so, the surface demanded a toll. The soil beneath his feet was dead, stripped of nutrients and scarred by exposure to chemicals and radiation that no ecosystem had adapted to endure.
This place wasn't always like this.
Gimble said, almost to itself.
Records show agricultural yield projections exceeding.
Gallion cut the feed with a flick of his fingers. He did not need the reminder. As daylight faded into something closer to perpetual dusk, Gallion reached the outskirts of a surface transit hub long abandoned by both humans and scales. Concrete pylons jutted from the ground like broken teeth, their undersides blackened by old fires. He slipped inside the shadow of the structure and paused, listening. His ears caught the faintest anomaly, a rhythm where there should have been none, heartbeats, human. He shifted his weight and waited. A figure emerged from behind a collapsed support beam, followed by two more. They were thin, wrapped in layered fabric and scavenged armor, their augmentations crude but functional. One of them raised a weapon, its barrel trembling slightly.
Easy?
Gallion said calmly.
I'm just passing through.
They hesitated, eyes flicking to his leg, to the faint glow of Gimble hovering above his shoulder.
Going east.
One of them asked.
North.
Gallion replied. The man grimaced.
San Francisco's worse every week. Scale patrols don't sleep anymore.
Neither do I.
They shared a look, then stepped aside.
Watch the valleys.
The man said.
Electromagnetic storms roll in without warning.
Gallion nodded once and continued on. Night never truly fell. The sky merely darkened, clouds thickening, until the world felt enclosed rather than open. Gallion traveled by sound and memory, following old rail lines and buried conduits that still whispered of human intention. By the time the distant glow of San Francisco's scale hub stained the horizon with faint, unnatural light, Gallion's muscles burned despite the dampening systems threaded through his spine. He stopped on a rise overlooking the ruined sprawl. The city rose from the coastline like a living monument, its silhouette reshaped by organic architecture that climbed and wrapped around human ruins. Bioluminescent veins traced structures that had once been glass and steel, pulsing slowly as though the city itself breathed somewhere within it. Connor was still alive, or already gone. Gallion straightened and began his descent toward the hub. The world above had not killed him. Yet.
Section 5.
Gimble hovered continuous low-grade scans as Gallion advanced, quietly siphoning unprotected data from passing relays.
Illegal trade density increasing.
It noted.
Morality decreasing at a proportional rate.
The closer Gallion drew to the coast, the more the land shifted from abandonment into something deliberately unfinished. Roads resurfaced in fragments, cracked asphalt reinforced with scavenged plating, marked by the tracks of vehicles that moved only under cover of cloud and interference. The air thickened with salt and chemical residue, and beneath it all ran a low, rhythmic hum that never quite resolved into sound. Gallion followed the old routes only as long as they served him. Black markets clustered beneath broken viaducts and half-collapsed transit hubs, their presence announced by steam, murmured voices, and the unmistakable scent of synthetic scale drugs. Vials passed between hands. Augmentations, human and otherwise, were displayed with a casual disregard for origin or consequence. Gallion did not stop.
Wise.
Gimble said.
You have a face people remember.
Rumors followed him anyway. Tagal's name surfaced in fragments. Tactician, tyrant, unifier, zealot, the one who had consolidated scale power, the one who no longer honored the old arrangements. Gallion listened without engaging, letting patterns form where facts refused to. As San Francisco's distant glow bled into the horizon, the road narrowed into controlled space. Ahead lay the exclusion zone. Gimble dimmed further.
I recommend not antagonizing anyone here.
It said.
Statistical survivability improves if we remain charming.
Gimble's systems shifted as they crossed the boundary.
Surveillance absence confirmed.
It reported.
Which I find deeply unsettling.
Section 6.
The exclusion zone announced itself long before Gallion reached its edge. Night had settled over the outskirts of San Francisco, and against the bruised darkness, the zone glowed like an infection that refused to heal. Light spilled outward in colors that did not belong to any single spectrum: neon blues, bruised purples, sickly greens, bleeding together and reflecting off mist rising from cracked streets and half-flooded foundations. Music thumped through the air in overlapping rhythms, bass lines colliding and reforming as sound systems scavenged from a dozen eras competed for dominance. The effect was disorienting, almost euphoric, as though the war had been pushed just far enough away to pretend it no longer existed. Gallion crossed the boundary and felt it immediately. The pressure lifted. No surveillance gradients clawed at his implants. No patrol patterns pressed against his awareness. His synthetic ears stopped compensating for interference and settled into a rare, uneasy quiet. This place was neutral because everyone agreed it was. The streets were alive. Repurposed storefronts pulsed with activity, their shattered facades reinforced by organic scale growth and human steel in equal measure. An old Macy's dominated one corner of the district, its faded signage still visible beneath layers of luminous graffiti. Inside, the building had been gutted and rebuilt into a sprawling lounge where humans and scales drank side by side, synthetic smoke curling above them as music rattled the bones of the structure. Gallion caught flashes as he passed. Human bodies threaded with scale biomatter, eyes glowing faintly, veins traced with light, scales with crude mechanical augmentations bolted to their frames, human tech grafted on without ceremony. People danced, argued, laughed, too loudly. Vials and data shards changed hands in open view. Deals were struck not in whispers but in plain sight, protected by the unspoken rule that nothing done here followed you outside. It felt like stepping sideways out of reality. Gallion did not slow. He moved through the crowd toward a 7-story building at the heart of the zone, its lower floors lit and loud, its upper levels dark and deliberately inaccessible. The bottom floor had once been a bar, then a club, then something else entirely. Now it was all of those things at once, a cavernous space where bodies pressed together beneath hanging lights and exposed conduits. At the entrance stood Gibby. He was large even by scale standards, his frame broad and dense, arms folded across his chest as though nothing short of a structural failure could move him. He wore plain clothes reinforced at the seams, and though the ridges along his jaw marked him unmistakably as Scale, the name he'd once carried had been abandoned years ago. Gallion stopped in front of him. Gibby's eyes narrowed slightly, then softened with recognition. He said, his voice a low rumble, barely audible over the music.
Do they know you're coming?
Gallion didn't answer. Gibby tilted his head, amusement creeping into his expression.
Where's your appointment, huh? You finally learn how to schedule things like a normal person?
Gallion met his gaze.
Not today, Gibby.
He said evenly.
Someone really fucked with me this time, and they're not going to be happy they did.
For a moment, Gibby studied him in silence. Then he whistled softly, long and low.
Well,
He said, stepping aside.
You give them my best regards. Those unlucky bastards.
He reached back and keyed the elevator behind him. The doors slid open with a muted chime, sealing off the noise of the club in an instant. Gallion stepped inside. The elevator rose smoothly, passing floor after floor that bore the scars of constant reinvention. Offices converted to living space, then stripped back to shell and rewired again. By the time it reached the top, the thrum of music below had faded into memory. The doors opened onto a wide, dimly lit room. Thomas Fritz stood near the windows, impossibly thin in a tailored suit that seemed to exaggerate his narrow frame. A gray top hat rested perfectly on his head, its orange rim glowing faintly in the low light. Green fluid pulsed behind the lenses of his goggles, casting shifting reflections across a smile that revealed immaculate teeth arranged just slightly wrong. He leaned on a cane, swinging it lazily as though the gesture itself amused him. Beside him stood Eagle Lampa, smaller than most of his kind but no less imposing. The scale's deep purple hide caught the light in muted patterns. He wore an identical suit, tailored to accommodate his mass, and each clawed finger bore a ring, some plain metal, others glowing faintly with energies Gallion's implants refused to categorize. Green goggles hid his eyes, mirroring Thomas's own. They spoke as one.
You made it through the noise.
Thomas began.
Which suggests motivation.
Eagle Lampa finished. Gallion stopped a few meters from them. Gimble hovered slightly behind Gallion's shoulder, running passive scans it pretended were casual.
Political power concentration detected.
Communicating via neural interface.
Multiple redundancies. Suggest politeness.
I'm looking for my brother.
He said.
Tell me where he's being held.
Thomas's smile widened.
No such thing as a free lunch.
Information is expensive.
Eagle Lampa continued. Thomas tapped his cane lightly against the floor.
Tagal has been, forgetting himself.
Self-righteous.
Eagle Lampa added.
Breaking agreements.
And agreements
Thomas said cheerfully.
are what keep places like this standing.
Gallion felt the shape of the offer forming and did not step away from it.
What do you want?
They answered together.
Tagal dead.
Thomas produced a thin blade, its edge shimmering with something chemical and alive.
A simple agreement,
He said.
signed in blood.
Eagle Lampa inclined his head.
Failure results in consequence. A virus tailored to recognize only your genetic structure.
Gallion extended his hand. Gimble murmured.
The blood contract phase. I will archive this under things we cannot undo.
Take the blood,
He said flatly.
and give me the damn information.
Thomas laughed, delighted. Eagle Lampa's throat rumbled with something close to approval.
You are always so reliable, Gallion. Succeed, and we may have to keep you around.
They placed a weapon in his hand, compact, purpose-built.
Encoded nerve agent.
Thomas said.
Keep the Tagal's DNA.
Eagle Lampa's voice lowered.
Once delivered, he will not live more than a minute.
Gallion closed his fingers around the grip. Outside the windows, the exclusion zone burned brightly against the night. Thomas twirled his cane once, then tapped it against the floor, the sound sharp and deliberate.
One more courtesy.
He said.
Because we do prefer results.
Eagle Lampa added. Thomas reached into his coat and produced a thin data shard no larger than a fingernail. Its surface rippled faintly, as if alive.
Tagal does not sleep where others expect.
Thomas said.
Its chamber sits below the old civic core, wrapped in 3 layers of living surveillance.
Biometric.
Eagle Lampa continued.
Behavioral. Predictive.
Thomas smiled.
Charming, really?
Gallion did not reach for the shard yet.
There is a service, Audrey.
Eagle Lampa said, lifting one clawed finger.
Built for pressure, equalization. When the city flooded, abandoned, forgotten.
and therefore ignored.
Thomas finished.
You enter through the drowned sublevels. Follow the thermal bleed and climb up, not down.
Gallion nodded once. Thomas held up the shard.
This makes you uninteresting.
Blind.
Egal Lampa clarified.
To scale surveillance for a limited time.
How limited?
Gallion asked. Thomas chuckled.
Long enough.
Egal Lampa leaned forward slightly.
Once inside the chamber, there will be no patrols. Tagal prefers solitude, reflection.
Self-righteousness.
Thomas said brightly. Gallion finally took the shard, sliding it into a port at the base of his wrist. Gimble flared briefly as it interfaced, then settled.
Oh,
It said quietly,
that is elegant code. Horrifying, but elegant.
sliding it into a port at the base of his wrist. His implants flickered as unfamiliar code threaded through them, settling like a veil across his perception. Thomas tilted his head.
Do try not to die before you reach him.
Gallion turned toward the door. Behind him, their voices followed, overlapping once more.
Remember.
Contracts are binding.
The elevator doors closed.
Section 7.
Gimble floated close as the shard's software synchronized.
I am officially blind to their systems.
It reported.
This is either a compliment or a death sentence.
Gallion moved through San Francisco as a shadow shaped by intent rather than light. The data shard's code threaded cleanly through his implants, layering itself atop Vanessa's maps and the routes supplied by the exclusion zone's leaders. Where scale surveillance should have tightened, it instead slid past him, uninterested, predictive systems quietly adjusting around an absence they did not recognize as a threat. The city revealed itself in pieces. San Francisco was no longer a ruin propped up by conquest. It was alive. Organic structures rose where glass towers once stood, their surfaces breathing faintly, flexing to accommodate wind, pressure, and movement. Streets were reinforced by living material that absorbed sound and redistributed weight, making the passage of scale military units eerily smooth. Bioluminescent veins traced pathways and building edges, not for aesthetics alone, but for communication. Signals pulsing beneath translucent layers faster than human infrastructure had ever allowed. Scale soldiers filled the streets. They moved in coordinated formations, weapons integrated seamlessly into armor grown rather than forged. Patrols shifted with predictive precision. Responding to patterns, Gallion could feel brushing past his awareness without ever locking onto him. And yet, there was life beyond the patrols. Behind semi-transparent walls, Gallion glimpsed domestic spaces carved into the living architecture. Rooms warmed by bioreactive light, tables grown directly from the structure itself. Scale families gathered in clusters that mirrored human habits so closely it unsettled him. With his enhanced hearing, the city opened further. Laughter carried. It was sharp, unfamiliar in tone, layered with hissing consonants, but laughter all the same. His auditory implant translated the language reflexively, smoothing meaning into something dangerously recognizable. Children teased. Adults argued gently. Someone told a story badly and laughed harder for it. Gallion slowed, just for a moment. Gimble's voice softened.
They laugh at home.
It said,
Humans do too. I fail to see how that has ever prevented war.
Gallion had seen scales before, countless times, but always through the lens of war. In the tunnels and on the surface, they were armor and weapons, teeth and orders, shapes moving with lethal intent. War stripped them down to monsters because war required it. Here, away from the front lines and propaganda alike, that shape fell apart. This was not an image hidden from Noah's underground halls, so much as one that had never survived contact with battle. It was not a horde, it was a civilization. His jaw tightened as he forced himself onward. The maps guided him away from main arteries and into older strata, where human construction still dictated geometry. Here, scale growth thickened to compensate for age and damage, sealing fractures and reinforcing load-bearing sections with almost casual efficiency. The data shard pulsed once, an alert without urgency, ahead. The service artery waited. Gimble scanned the darkness below.
Path confirmed.
It said.
Low probability of detection, high probability of regret.
The entrance was unremarkable, half submerged beneath a collapsed waterfront structure where the bay had clawed its way inland decades earlier. Pressure seals designed for emergency equalization lay dormant, their surfaces overgrown with layered organic plating that had learned to ignore its own forgotten systems. Gallion crouched at the threshold. Behind him, the city continued to live. Ahead, the artery descended into darkness, leading upward toward Tagal's solitude. Gallion took one steady breath and stepped inside.
Section 8.
Thomas and Eagle Lampa had lied. Not outright, not meaningfully in the way they would define truth. But the path was not empty, and the solitude they had promised was a curated illusion. As Gallion emerged from the service artery, he felt it immediately, the density of intent in the air, the subtle pressure of attention that his borrowed blindness no longer deflected. Guarded then, he paused just inside the threshold, letting water drip from his armor and bionic leg, letting his breathing slow as Gimble's glow dimmed to a pinprick.
Correction.
Gimble murmured.
Low traffic does not mean low hostility.
4 heartbeats registered, not clustered, placed. Gallion's neural implant overlaid the space with ghostly geometry, angles of approach, dead zones, lines of sight. His ears rebuilt the chamber from echoes alone, mapping living walls and load-bearing growths, identifying the faint hum of weapon capacitors charging and discharging in disciplined cycles. 2 guards flanked the upper approach, scale infantry in grown armor that flexed as they shifted weight. One moved along the lower curve of the chamber, tail dragging lightly across the surface to mask footfalls. The 4th stood apart, elevated near a node of living architecture where the walls thickened and the air vibrated with active systems. The Watcher, Gallion smiled without showing teeth. He released the first decoy with a flick of his wrist. A palm-sized device skittered across the floor, emitting a burst of false acoustic signatures, panicked footsteps, a dropped weapon, a curse in badly accented scale. One of the upper guards pivoted instantly. Gallion moved. He crossed the space in 3 strides, timing his approach to the decoy's echo, blades sliding into the seam beneath the guard's plating with surgical economy. The scale hissed once, then folded, armor sealing reflexively around a body that no longer mattered. The second fell to gravity. Gallion slapped a magnetic charge onto the living wall and vaulted backward as it detonated, not with flame but force, collapsing a section of growth inward. The blast threw the guard off balance, and Gallion met him mid-fall, snapping the neck with a practiced twist that ended resistance before it could begin.
Efficient.
Gimble said.
Almost rude.
The 3rd guard rushed. Gallion rolled beneath the swing of a plasma-aged weapon, came up behind the scale and drove a shock spike into the base of the skull. The body locked rigid, then toppled forward, weapon clattering harmlessly against the floor. 3 heartbeats vanished. The 4th did not move. Instead, the chamber changed. Systems woke all at once. The living walls brightened, patterns racing beneath translucent membranes as data surged through bioreactive conduits. Gallion felt the pressure spike in his implants, an invasive curiosity probing the edges of his defenses.
Oh.
Gimble said, tone shifting.
That one noticed you immediately.
The technomancer stepped forward. He was larger than the others, his armor less martial and more intimate, threaded with interfaces that crawled across his frame like living circuitry. His eyes glowed with layered overlays, and when he blinked, the air itself seemed to stutter. Gallion's bionic leg went dead. He hit the floor hard, breath driven from his lungs as pain lanced up through systems that should not have allowed it.
Leg offline.
Gimble reported.
Auditory input severely compromised.
The technomancer tilted his head, studying Gallion with professional interest.
Neural and spinal security is impressive,
he said, voice filtered and distant.
You're expensive.
Pressure mounted. Gallion felt his consciousness fray at the edges as the scale pushed deeper. Fingers of code scraping against reinforced partitions, another blink, and his ears fell silent entirely, the world collapsing into a dull, suffocating quiet.
Auditory module state is critical.
Gallion's hand closed around a final device. He threw, the small sphere bounced once, twice, rolling to a stop at the technomancer's feet. Nothing happened. The scale's mouth curved in something like a smile. Gimble sighed.
That one usually goes boom,
it said.
Let me fix that.
The sphere detonated. There was no fire, no satisfying explosion, just an abrupt, violent absence where the technomancer had been, systems collapsing inward as the focused charge erased armor, interfaces and flesh in a blink. Silence rushed back. Gimble surged forward, light flaring as it flooded Gallion's implants with corrective code, rebooting damaged pathways before cascading failure could set in.
Booting motor functions. Restoring auditory feed. Please refrain from dying while I work.
Sound returned in fragments. Pain dulled to something manageable. Gallion dragged in a breath and pushed himself upright, leg responding sluggishly before stabilizing.
I think.
Gimble added, hovering back to its usual position.
You should have started with that. It was precisely effective.
Gallion exhaled. Ahead beyond the ruined guards and reknitting walls, the path to Tagal's chamber lay open.
Section 9.
Tagal did not rise when Gallion entered. The chamber was vast but restrained, grown rather than built, its walls layered in translucent organic panels that pulsed with slow, measured light. No guards stood at attention. No weapons were drawn. The air was still, heavy with the quiet confidence of a place that had never expected intrusion. At the center of it all stood Tagal. He was taller than Gallion had imagined, but not monstrous. His frame was powerful without excess. His orange scales arranged in natural, deliberate symmetry, each one catching the ambient light like polished stone. His posture was relaxed, almost conversational, hands folded behind his back as if he were awaiting a guest, rather than an assassin. Gallion felt a flicker of dissonance. This was not the war beast carved into every briefing, every scream-filled corridor, every memory soaked in blood. This was something else entirely. Tagal studied him with intelligent, unhurried eyes.
Who sent you?
He asked calmly.
I would wager it was those crazed twins from the exclusion zone.
Gallion did not lower his weapon.
I'm here for my brother, that is all.
Tagal's head tilted slightly.
Your brother?
His gaze unfocused for a brief moment as unseen systems engaged. Then recognition settled in.
Ah, I see. It would seem fate has given us a chance.
He turned away, pacing slowly as though considering a lecture rather than a threat.
As they would have it, my work is done. I have united the scale forces. My death will bring nothing but more unity, exactly what they want.
I don't care.
Gallion snapped, raising the bioweapon and leveling it at Tagal's chest.
Just tell me where he is.
Tagal stopped.
Connor Liam. Child of Teresa and Jason Liam. Sadly, they died in a meaningless war years ago.
The words struck like a physical blow. Tagal paused, then continued, his voice almost reflective.
Why do we fight, Gallion? What is the point? This endless war leads only to sorrow. I have ruled for years so my people could live without persecution. Do you know what your parents did? Why they died?
Gallion took a step forward. Every alarm inside him screamed. 4 lines of white-blue plasma snapped into existence around him, slicing the air with surgical precision, forming a cage he could feel but not cross.
Tagal,
Gallion said through clenched teeth.
Just tell me where my brother is?
Tagal regarded him calmly.
Then what? You leave peacefully after killing 4 of my best men?
He shook his head slowly.
No. You mean to kill me, and I will not stop you. You simply need to listen. I know you believe I am the enemy, but that could not be further from the truth.
What the hell are you talking about?
Gallion demanded.
If you're going to kill me, just do it. I'm nothing without my brother.
Tagal's eyes softened.
Do you know where we came from? The scales?
I don't fucking care.
We are from here.
The words cut through the room before Gallion could respond. Gimble dropped abruptly from its hover, slamming into his hand. Its casing flashed crimson, systems screaming, a new voice poured from the drone, flat, authoritative, utterly inhuman.
Terminate the target immediately. You are in immediate danger. Do not allow the target to continue. He must comply or face consequences.
The message looped.
Terminate the target immediately.
Gallion's grip tightened.
Gimble,
he whispered. Tagal watched the exchange with grim understanding.
They do not want you to hear what comes next. We saved your brother. We did not capture him.
The impact was sudden. A dart struck Tagal's neck, embedding itself with a sharp, wet sound. On instinct alone, Gallion moved. He released a knife in a single fluid motion, the blade crossing the room faster than thought. It buried itself between the eyes of a figure in the doorway. The body fell. Scale. Not human. Gallion's senses reeled. He had not heard them. Had not felt them. The voice from Gimble escalated, volume spiking, distortion bleeding through.
Terminate. Terminate.
Tagal staggered, collapsing to one knee, his systems already fighting the toxin. He looked up at Gallion one last time.
See you in hell.
Then he fell unconscious, the plasma lines vanished, the chamber went silent, and the war for a single impossible moment waited. To be continued.